Welcome to the Alley-Oop Podcast, folks. I'm your host, Paul Morrissey, and that was the great Warren Zevon with Lawyers, Guns, and Money, which is also the song that I picked for the band at the David Letterman show to play. Paul Schaefer and the boys played Lawyers, Guns, and Money when I came on to the show and at the end of my set. So that song now has new meaning. But I always liked it, and I always thought it was cool. So that was cool, and if you haven't seen any of Warren Zevon's appearances on the David Letterman show, you can YouTube that stuff. He's always very funny, great artist, and gone too soon, of course, but left a lot of great stuff behind for us to enjoy. So, and also, if you've never heard this song called Hit Somebody, it's about a goon in hockey, which is the guy that just is sent in there to beat up people and start fights. David Letterman actually does lends his voice to that song, Hit Somebody by Warren Zevon, if you've never heard that. So let's get into the legitimate sports podcast this week, Alley-Oop Podcast. We've had a lot of my comedian buddies, some authors. Now we're right back to sports. My guest this week, great guest to have about basketball, especially Dan Woike, which is spelled W-O-I-K-E, but I guess it's said like W-O-Y, Woike. But he is the beat writer, which is the guy that covers a team every day in baseball, basketball, football, any sport. But he's a beat writer for the LA Clippers. And it's for the Orange County Register, which doesn't seem like it'd be that big a deal. But Dan is, not to slight him at all, but it's not an LA Times type of deal. But Orange County Register, they have him cover the Clippers every day, and he travels with the team, and so he's got a lot of great insight on the Clippers, especially with this last year and all the Donald Sterling turmoil and all that kind of stuff. But special connection with Dan and myself, we were both actors. We both played reporters in the Chris Paul commercials, the Nike Air Jordan Ridiculous commercials, which you might have seen. We are barely in them, even though we spent all day at USC filming them. Craig Sager was also on the shoot. Chris Paul found out that day that he got his old nemesis doesn't have a T in it. Nemesis, J.J. Redick. He found out he was coming to the team last summer, which I think he wasn't too thrilled about, if I could read the Chris Paul body language. I'm sure they weren't great friends being at Duke and Wake Forest, but J.J. was a good addition to the squad last year, and I think things are looking up for the Clippers. So we'll talk to Dan about this. I already talked to him, so I know. But and Dan is he's an up-and-coming guy. I think he's already kind of a legitimate voice in basketball here, but he's a frequent guest on the Jim Rome Show. Actually, you can catch him every night this week if you have the CBS Sports Network. He's a guest on the panelist guy on the Jim Rome Show every night this week. So that is, until the 9th. If you're lost in Podcastville and you don't know what day it is and you're just listening to old podcasts, this could be years in the future. But you wouldn't really care about how the Clippers are going to do in 2014. But, yeah. The 5th through the 9th, you can listen to or see Dan on the Jim Rohn Sports Network. You can follow Dan at Dan Woike. I'm still having trouble saying it. W-O-I-K-E at Dan Woike on Twitter. And for me, I will be on the road a little bit. The Letterman stuff was great. Thanks all for all the nice messages, and it's really opened up a lot of doors. So thank you for the kind words, especially from a lot of people I haven't heard from in a long time. So always nice to see a nice note from somebody back home or I went to school with, or a comedian buddy I haven't seen in a while, or comedians I don't even know who are really nice and know how much that means for a comic like me to get on Letterman. So thank you guys so much. I will be in Portland, Oregon this weekend. Hopefully, I'll get to go to the Nike factory store, which I've never been to. I've had people pick me up items from there, but apparently you can get any sneaker from any time that Nike's ever made from this employee store. So that's what I'm trying to sneak in. I believe it's in Beaverton, Oregon. I'll be in Portland. I'll be at the Helium Comedy Club in Portland, Oregon this weekend, which is the August 7th through the 9th. And then my birthday is August 10th, which is also my mother's birthday, which she had to leave her birthday party to have me. So if that isn't sacrifice, I don't know what is. And then I will be I'm also excited. Next week, I'll be at the Comedy Club on State, which I think is State Street, in Madison, Wisconsin, home of the Onion. I've heard from everyone. Not one person has told me it's not a cool town. So can't wait to go to that and do those shows August 14th to the 16th. And then I'll be doing a quick trip to New York. I'll be at Gotham Comedy Club Tuesday, August 19th. And then I think I'll relax a little bit after that. But hopefully you guys enjoy this podcast with Dan Woike. We'll be talking about some Clipper stuff and also basketball as a whole. This was right before the Paul George injury, which is terrible. I still can't watch it. I'm one of those guys I really can't watch. You know, I remember watching the Joe Theismann injury when I was a little kid, and I still can't watch people turn their ankles or break their legs or anything ridiculous like that. Just enough people have told me that it's something I know that I don't want to see. But terrible injury for the Pacers, and Dan will not talk about what that means to the Pacers. We'll talk about the Clippers. So all you Clipper fans, enjoy NBA basketball. This is great insight on what it was like to get through that whole Donald Sterling team and what almost happened. You know, there was almost a couple walkouts and boycotts and all kinds of weird stuff was happening, and Dan was right in the middle of it. So hopefully you enjoy this episode. For more info, you can go to paulhasawebsite.com. Also go to alleyooppodcast.com to donate some money, or use our Amazon link, which you just click on our Amazon link and buy whatever you're going to buy. And it throws a few pennies to us just because you used our link at no cost to you. So enjoy this episode with LA Clippers beat writer Dan Woike. I'm going to get it right at some point. Enjoy the episode. Dad, get me out of this. Ha! We're in beautiful, is this downtown El Segundo?
This would be downtown El Segundo.
So I'm here with Dan, and how do I say the last name? It's Woike?
Woike.
Woike?
Yeah.
Is that, what is the origin of that?
I think it's Scottish, Russian. I have a strong cultural heritage in my family. Where I know my mom's side of the family is German for sure, but the rest of it, we don't really know.
Oh, okay. So, and you haven't had to change it for show business purposes yet?
You know, it's funny. I'm convinced I'd be way more successful if it was like Smith or something that was like easier to pronounce.
Yeah, or just, well, sometimes it makes you stand out, but then sometimes it's like, what the hell is that guy's name?
But yeah, I know. I wonder if they're like producers or like to like radio shows are like, I'm looking for someone to get on. And they're looking down, you know, the list of like reporters, and they're like, oh, this Dan guy's smart. And then they're like, well, let's just call someone else.
Well, I can tell everybody where we met. We both got picked to be in the Chris Paul commercial, the Nike commercials.
My acting debut.
Ridiculous. So it was your acting debut.
Well, I did a play in fourth grade, where I was the antagonist in Showboat.
And you played basically yourself.
Yes, cool. It was not a stretch. I was a reporter.
Yeah.
They were like, stand here and look like you don't care that much. What's being said? And I'm like, I can pull that off.
And the funny thing is, I actually had to audition.
So did I.
Pretend. Oh, you did?
Multiple auditions.
Really?
Yeah. So like the way it worked was because, you know, it was like a murky situation in terms of like, could I do the commercial or not because of, you know, I cover the Clippers.
Yeah. Well, let me explain that to you. You're a beat writer. Do they still use that term? You travel with the L.A. Clippers.
And, follow them around the country.
For the Orange County Register.
Yeah, sports writer.
Yeah, so. I don't think you live in Orange County, but that's all right.
I've never lived in Orange County. But that's all right. We have an L.A. Register now, too. So.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, it's both. But
so when did you start working there?
5 years ago.
Okay.
Around then?
So you were there for the bottom of the...
Of what, the newspaper business?
Of the Clippers.
Oh, no, I wasn't covering the Clippers then.
Okay.
So the way that worked is a funny story. So I've always loved basketball. We talk a lot about basketball. But I actually got hired to cover the Angels. It was my first job at the Register. And I covered the Angels for a season. And then we kind of reshuffled, and I ended up covering high school tennis, which was like not like I was covering USC before that. And I ended up covering high school tennis for almost a full year.
You covered UFC?
USC.
Oh, USC. I was like, UFC?
No, not UFC.
It's not a busy beat at all. No. It's like once a month.
And then so when I was covering high school tennis, like I was obviously looking for something bigger to do. And it was Blake Griffin's rookie year, and I was always in my boss's ear saying, we should get back on the Clippers beat. We used to cover them, and we'd stop because they were so horrible.
Right.
And I was like, they're going to be good. They've got this guy Blake Griffin. He's awesome. He's doing like the Mozgov game and like all that stuff. And then the day they traded for Chris Paul the next year, they emailed me. They're like, hey, would you want to interview to be the Clippers beat writer? And I was like, yeah, I've been telling you that for 6 months that I want to do it, and I ended up doing it that. So I've only covered good Clipper basketball.
Oh, okay. Because I was here for the bottom.
Yeah.
My friends, they have the season tickets, and they've had them for a while. And I remember this distinctly because I, like you, I love basketball, but I'm a Celtics fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I did cover the Kings when they were really terrible till they got good, like a 3-year window. So I saw when Arco was empty until they got, Chris Webber and
and Vlade and like those super fun teams.
Yeah, the playoff teams. But so I've seen it once before, but I've never seen I remember I went to the Clippers and they had some horrible record, and we were sitting like second row. And you're excited because this is an NBA game.
Sure.
And then I see the Clippers come out, and I remember distinctly it was Marcus Camby who did this. He was like stretching his arms and yawning. Because it was like an afternoon game. And I was just like, oh, yeah, this is that guy's shitty job. Like, I never thought of it before. Like, I thought NBA was always like the pinnacle of everyone's thing.
No,
but I'm like, no, this guy has lost more games this year than he's lost in his entire life.
Yeah. And
if he let it get to him, he'd probably go crazy. So now he's just going into the shitty office for his shitty boss and picking up his paycheck.
It's funny, like, there's elements of that. Like, I remember, like, my first, like, kind of, like, because 82 games is a long season.
Yeah.
Like, it is a long time. Like, especially, like, when you're traveling the whole time. Like, I did it this year, and it's, like, it's a grind.
Yeah, and you're not even playing. You're
No, exactly. And it's exhausting. Just, like, getting on and off planes like that is crazy. Right. But I remember when one of my first jobs out of college was covering Ole Miss football. And I drove up. I grew up in Chicago. Was a Bulls fan. I drove up to watch the Bulls play the Martin Luther King Day game in Memphis, and I was very excited because at halftime I found out Boyz II Men was performing.
Okay, yeah.
And like they were in like some weird Motown phase though.
Motown Philly,
not Motown Philly though. They didn't do Motown Philly.
Oh yeah,
it was unbelievable, right? They did like a couple 4 top songs or something like that. And
they
then
want you to hear the new stuff.
Yeah, and then they went to End of the Road. They did End of the Road was how they closed at halftime. And I remember the Bulls had this horrible first half. And like this is like Tyrus Thomas, Chicago Bulls, like where they still think he's a starter. And Tyrus Thomas walks out at halftime. Boyz II Men still performing, and he's just lip syncing everything to End of the Road. And I remember watching and just be like, dude, you just had like 6 turnovers. Like you had played like the worst half of your life. But it's like you have to be not like you don't care, but you can't care too much.
Well, that's your life every day. Like even in college, you have 2 games a week. You don't play 4 games a week or 3 games a week. It's just I was kind of fascinated by that, especially for these guys who are on a really bad team but making a lot of money. So it's kind of a choice that a lot of these guys made, was to come to this crappy team because
and a lot of those guys didn't. Like, I mean, that was the other thing too. Is like, you know, a lot of those guys, like if you signed with the Clippers back then, like, you was clearly you were doing it for the money. There was no other reason. But like for the guys who got traded there, like Doc Rivers was a guy who got traded to the Clippers when he was a player, and he talks about how miserable he was.
Right.
You know, he wanted to win games, and like the next thing you know, like he's in LA, not playing for the Lakers against his will.
Yeah.
It wasn't a happy place for a lot of people for a lot of years. That's all changed though.
Yeah. That was the thing, is like the last game of that season, I think it was right before they got Blake. I remember they're playing Oklahoma City, I think was the last game. They're down by 45. All the scrubs come in. Dunleavy got thrown out. And Kamen's doing everything he can to get thrown out, like yelling at the ref. And I could just see the ref smiling at him like, I'm not going to – this is way more embarrassing for you to be out here.
That was his punishment.
Than for me to throw you out and give you the easy gate. And they were like, even the scrubs were like throwing alley-oops on the Clippers. It was just the most – and everyone is booing. Like for the last 2 minutes. I've never seen anything like it. It's like they're literally going to get rid of every player and the coach. And they almost did.
Yeah.
So, and now it's basically like, I mean, since you've been here, it's, you know, aside from – we'll get to the Sterling stuff later, but like – you know, for them to get Blake Griffin and then him to get hurt, I mean, I almost thought that Baron Davis was like going to be somewhat of a savior.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like they were always going to be interesting and young, even if they didn't get Chris Paul. Mm-hmm. You know, they would have had Eric Gordon. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, a weird career for that guy.
Yeah,
in terms of injuries and stuff.
I was like, he's going to be a good player on a bad team,
like good scorer, right? And but you know, I mean, DeAndre was still. Yeah, he was still there, young and jumping all over the place, and so they were always going to be like at least interesting. I've always kind of gravitated towards like I'm a White Sox fan growing up in Chicago, like kind of like the second team, like the underdog team. You know what I mean? Like the Mets versus the Yankees or whatever and stuff like that. And so I was watching some Clippers before I started covering the team, and like I don't know, something about like you mentioned like you know, Kaman trying to get tossed and like afford it, like that was always the stuff that endeared me to teams. Right. like if you're gonna be bad, be fun bad, you know.
But also like, and you know this from, there's so much a great perspective that you have when you're covering a team every game. You get to know the players. Like I'm still an X and O's guy. Like I've always been like, you know, because my dad was a coach and I've watched 30 different teams, you know, practice every day. And it's like, well, I'll, you know, this guy, I know he's a hard worker. This guy can only play well in practice. This guy, you know, you learn to like read guys. So whenever I watch a team, I'm like, all right, I can tell they don't like that guy. He's not listening to the coach. Like, I can already kind of pick that stuff out, but I don't know all the stuff that you know from watching those guys every day.
It's funny. It's like you get all of that stuff, but then like, so NBA TV this week is like re-airing like the 10 best games of the season. And one of the games was Game 7 of the Clippers-Warriors series. It was like, I think like number 6.
Right.
It was just a great game. I had almost completely forgotten like what happened in that game. And it's just because it's like, they just kind of bleed, you know, like all into each other. And it's like you watch and it's like it triggers it and you're like, oh, okay, like they came back, you know, like I just didn't remember that like Golden State was up by 10 like early in the in the second half of that game. Like it just, because there's just so many. Like it's not like I've covered college football before and like that is so much better. Yeah. Like I remember almost everything about every college football game I've covered because there's 12.
Yeah.
It's so easy.
But that's so frustrating as a writer if you have to come up with like a new story every day and you're like second guessing everything for like a week.
Yeah. Well, it's like the best sports writer, and I bet you there's like elements of this too in comedy. Like a big sports writer question is always like, what day is it? Like there are times like where I just like have no idea what day of the week it is. And it's like it's a huge fear that I'm going to write like Tuesday on Friday. Like it could
even
totally
during
happen.
the commercial, like we shot the commercial at USC, and it was, so we had, I mean, it was pretty neat. They were shooting the basketball scenes at the gym.
That was cool to watch. I enjoyed that.
And we were in the locker room with the fake basketball players.
Who were all real basketball players, too, which was interesting enough, yeah.
And then there was a locker room scene, which wasn't in the locker room.
No.
And then Craig Sager was somewhere, but I don't think we really met him. Right?
Yeah, we came across real quickly, I think, because he's a guy I've met before, covering the league and stuff, but... Okay. Yeah, it was an interesting process, kind of a weird look into that sort of. And here, when we say we're in the commercial or whatever, there's an eighth of my face is in the commercial, and the back of your head, right, a little bit.
It's pretty amazing. There was definitely background guys that were there was a guy standing. I know what you're talking about. Camera, and I'm like, wow, that guy should have got paid too, but
no, he got a free meal out of it.
Yeah.
Now it was But I guess one thing I want to ask you about sitting close, because you sit close to games. This is my favorite part about covering the NBA. Is what are your favorite things about when you get the chance to sit close that you don't get when you sit 20 rows away, 30 rows away? Things you notice that you don't normally or wouldn't normally see on TV or whatever.
You can see who's talking to each other. You can see who's complaining. You can see the facial expressions, because I remember. Bill Simmons wrote this, and I don't think anybody else really noticed. Every time Baron Davis threw a pass to Kaman, and he wouldn't catch it, or he'd fumble, or he'd miss the layup, Baron would just make this look, and he was so frustrated with him. And I think Bill Simmons wrote it's like when a 3-year-old starts writing on your wall or something. It's this just disappointed look, but there's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
And you can tell he just wanted to stop passing it to him, but he couldn't. And those are the things when I talk to, people are like, oh, Kaman, he's an all-star this year. It's but Baron Davis hates playing with him. He just can't deal with it. So it's stuff like that, mostly the chemistry stuff, Yeah. With the Celtics, you'll see Rondo, you would see Doc, and you probably might even know this, you would see Doc drop this play, a 36-year-old Ray Allen running full speed, decoy one side, comes off a double pick, and then Rondo just kind of looks at him and then keeps dribbling. And you could just tell how pissed Ray Allen was, how pissed Doc was
Sure.
that he didn't run the play.
Yeah.
And it's that's what tears teams apart.
It's funny you mentioned that. So when I was watching Game 7, there was a play where they ran, because they used J.J. Redick a lot like Ray Allen. And just kind of constant motion guy. And they ran a play, and they got him an open 19-footer or something like that, coming off 2 or 3 screens. And afterwards, Redick point, when shooters you point to the guy who threw the pass or whatever.
Right.
So he points that at Chris Paul, but then there's a timeout, and as he walks by, he pointed at Doc Rivers too, because it was just a perfectly executed play. Yeah. I'll say my favorite sitting close thing that happened to me this year was during the Clippers Thunder series in LA. I was coming out with a cold, been traveling like crazy, and I had. The Clippers have these airplane-sized bottles of water, like the 8-ounce water bottle or whatever,
right.
And I brought and I was actually it was at Staples Center, and I was sitting on the scorer's table, which I almost never sit there.
Okay.
And I'm sitting on the scorer's table. I've got these 3 bottles of water sitting in front of me, and really early in the game, there's a foul on the Clippers or something like that, and Thabo Sefolosha bolts over to towards by the Clipper bench and is water, 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 and looking for someone to give him a water. They're like, this is the playoffs, we're not going to give you any water. And he walked by, he just kept walking towards his bench, and I was sitting in between the two, and he just saw a bottle of water there, and he just stole it from me, middle of the game, and it happened all on TV too,
right.
because there was a foul, a guy coming up, and
funny.
I was so furious that because I couldn't get up and go. What if I'd walked over to does that give me carte blanche to walk to the Thunder bench and just grab a Gatorade?
Right.
I want just it's cool, guys. Thabo, and then in Oklahoma City, he did the exact same thing to a Clipper PR guy.
Really?
Stole another water. So he was a giant water thief.
That's funny.
In the middle of games. The other thing I like is I like to watch the guys when they interact with fans and stuff, you know what I mean? Which is weird, because you would think with the pressure and all that stuff.
Yeah.
This is why they're so different than normal human beings.
Right.
is like, in the pressure of a playoff game, you would think Doc Rivers would be like 1,000% locked into the court. But it's like, if there are people sitting between him and the scorer's table or whatever, like he's going to work those people and he's going to talk to them.
Yeah. And
he's going to have them laughing and stuff and like he's going to joke around.
Yeah,
and
that's
players are like that too.
The old, if you ever watch stuff about Frank Layden,
the old NBA entertainment videos,
he is hilarious. Like he used to just talk to everybody and even the opposing fans.
Those are the guys that he talks to the most. Yeah,
he would be like, "Hey, did you pay for your seat, or are you one of the freebies?" And he's like, "I paid for it." All right, you can keep talking.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets back to the point where it's like, over the course of 82 games, you do anything 82 times, like over the course of 5 months or whatever, like you got to keep it interesting. Like you just, and I think guys talk to each other, they talk to fans, they talk to refs. I mean, the stuff that people say to refs is like incredible.
Yeah,
like the bar. I mean. You played in college, I played in high school. Like, the bar for, like, getting a technical, like, when we played, it was, like, I mean, there were certain things you couldn't say.
Right.
And it's, like, in the NBA, like, that is, like, it is, like, you can, like, unload, like, a Richard Pryor tirade on somebody.
Well, I mean, those guys, they probably have the same ref maybe 20 times a year, too.
Totally,
so
and they know them and stuff, and, like, every team has, like, their guys that they think are, like, out to get them. Mm-hmm. Like, every team has them. And it's just like it's fun to watch those games.
Well, what do you think about like Crawford, a guy like that? Like, is he just wanting to be the center of attention?
I mean, I think he's just done it so long that he's very comfortable in the way he does it.
Well, that's why I feel like it's bad for the league, especially like the David Stern league would be. We're not going to let anybody make this game his. You know what I mean?
I mean, but like, so I mean, how many? When you think of like NBA refs, if you're like a big NBA fan, like. We're talking like not gambling, but just someone like who watches games on TV and stuff. You probably name 5 or 6 refs.
I don't even think that many. I think everybody knows who Joey Crawford is.
From like the mid, like the Steve Javie, Joey Crawford, Dick Bavetta, Hugh Hollins.
Yeah. I mean, there's
like those are like kind of the classic guys.
There's the guy that played Leon Wood.
Leon Wood is a current ref. Yeah. Viola Palmer.
I would say people know maybe 2.
Oh, now it's just Joey Crawford. Yeah. I think that's good in general.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. If you do a great
Joey
job,
Crawford, would people know Joey Crawford if he didn't look like, say, like Albert Fudd and
they
stuff
would
like that?
Because he always stops the game for like amounts of time, even when it's like a simple thing. He's like, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do," and it's like, everyone look at me for a minute while I explain this, or it's almost like, how like you were saying, you notice when JJ's. Like, you've seen guys that are doing that just so everyone else is like Kobe does that a lot. Yeah. Like, he tries to act like he's being nice to people just so everyone will say, "Oh, yeah, he was really nice."
What a great teammate, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's all for show, I feel like. So I think his referee style is like, I'm in charge of this game, which I don't like.
Well, I think, too, like, I mean, I think... To get the respect, and I don't know if he has the respect of players or not, but to get the respect of NBA players, when I mean you think about the physical differences, the age differences, and stuff like that, it's pretty remarkable that he's even still like able to even be a part of it. I'm not like a Joey Crawford fan. Like, I really have no horse in like a referee fight. Like, I don't like games that are long. Yeah, like that's like the biggest change that I guess that's happened to me since like. When you become like, and when you're doing TV, I'm sure too, is like, especially on the West Coast, it's like games if games end at 10:15, like you're sunk. Like you can't do your job. It's almost impossible.
What's your deadline?
I'm 10:30, so it's like
you've got to be writing the whole game.
Yeah, like a lot of times, like you're trying. It's funny. A big sports writer joke, if you see people on Twitter do it, is if they ever tweet like "or so it seemed." It's like out of New York. It's like this idea that you write your story. For like one thing's going to happen, and then something happens, and then just like in the 9th paragraph, you're like, "or so it seemed," and that's your like get out of jail free card for it. But it's definitely like it's a different kind of writing. It's funny, like we've talked a little bit about like joke writing and stuff like that because that's something I'm interested in. But like that is such a different process than like having to sit around and like at 10-10 and the score is 101 to 99, and you don't know what's going to happen. And I've got to write 400 words in 20 minutes.
Well, that's what I mean, too, is you've got to do an economy of words, too, where maybe you've got you've always probably got too much to say, and you've got to keep.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
I mean, like here, like, and this is what's changing too in my job is that like, so most people who care about the Clippers because of League Pass and DVRs and stuff like that are going to probably watch a game. Most people. So you don't need to tell them like, well, Blake Griffin,
right,
hit a jump shot with 4 minutes to go, and then this happened, and then that happened. Like, you only really use that as like that's like a total crutch,
right?
Like, unless it's like those really, really close games that you don't know what's going to happen, then you get a little play-by-play. But like, so it's interesting. Is like you got to try to figure out ways to take what happened in a game and contextualize it in the course of like an 82-game season.
Yeah,
which is. To kind of give people like I view the season as sort of like a singular like a book, and each game is maybe like a tiny chapter,
right?
And so it's like what does Game 3 have to do with Game 70? It's hard to like try to string that together,
right?
And that's what I try to do, and sometimes fail. And sometimes
so what's like a typical day if you're just at like a home game? You're going to their walkthrough, or
yeah, I go to shoot around at like 10:30 usually.
Okay.
Something like that, and talk to a couple guys there. I'll come home.
Now, what do you talk to them about? Just
like, I mean...
Because these guys all know you. You travel with them.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, like, it'll be like, sometimes it'll be about like a trend that I've noticed. Or something like maybe it'll be... I'm trying to think of an example. If a guy's struggling, too, we'll talk about why you're struggling.
Yeah. How receptive are those guys to talking to you? Or they just know that you're part of
everybody's different. It's like you're part of the machine. I mean, some guys are more open than others. I mean, like for instance, like a guy who's really good is like a guy like Jamal Crawford is a guy like you talk to Jamal about anything. Like he's always willing to talk, good, bad, whatever. He'll talk. You know what I mean? And you can talk to those guys. Some other guys are more economical with their time and don't like to do it as much. But you
can tell the guys that are probably good guys if you were just friends with them, but just because you're the media, they don't want to. I mean, yeah. I mean, like you're not. I mean, I think here, like you end up being friendly with people, but it's not like it's the summer. Like I got to call. Right.
Call the to see what DJ's up to today or whatever. Like that's not how I approach it. But you do spend a lot of time with them, and I think that. I mean, like anything, like there are relationships that form, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and you got to try to navigate that stuff. But like, I like a shoot around, it'll be like for me, I don't like to look ahead too much to that night's game because usually what I'm doing is I'm talking for the next day's newspaper. So I'm looking at trying to find something bigger picture. And then, we might talk a little bit about just like, other stuff or like opponents, like upcoming games, like a little bit like of that stuff, and then I'll come home. I'll kind of hang out for a little bit. I might try to catch a nap, and then because you gotta peak. I feel like I have to peak at like 7.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like between 7 to 10. So like, and then I'll get to Staples Center around 4:30 or something like that for a 7:30 game. You talk to the coach before the game, talk to the opponent coach, go in the locker rooms. Try to formulate one of your stories for that night if there's news or an injury or something like that. And then a lot of it's just relationship building.
Yeah.
How
is Doc? I've always heard he's really good with.
Yeah, I mean, he for a reporter, I mean, he knows what to say and how to say it.
Do you feel like he sizes you up, like as far as like, does this guy know basketball or am I
don't think they care that much.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, one Doc thing that, so he's from Chicago, I'm from Chicago, and we're both White Sox fans. And I remember talking to him early in the year, right before the White Sox season started, kind of about the team, and I had said something like, at least they're young, was like my feeling. So like I was excited because at least they had a guy like Jose Abreu. This is before he was awesome or whatever. Like at least instead of watching the same team just get older and worse,
right,
at least maybe they'll be young and bad, which then there's hope. And Doc was like, oh, so you're one of those fans. which tells me everything that you need to know about Doc's like opinion towards veterans.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just in that little thing, like, so I think, instantly, like, yeah, I think that he would be like a guy that would like lump me in as someone who would say something like, oh, you should be playing your rookie shooting guard just because no one knows if he's any good or not.
Right.
Versus the guy who's been in the league for 13 years and his like skills are maybe deteriorating. Yeah. So I am one of those people, and take that, Doc Rivers. I was totally right about Jose Abreu. Like he's like the only reason to watch the White Sox. So no, I mean like, and I think that it was a little window into kind of that type of stuff. But I mean, like those guys, like, because here's the thing, like no matter how much I know basketball, like it's gonna help me in how I write about it, and it's gonna help me kind of like. I view myself kind of as like a basketball translator sometimes on some of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? But like, I'm not going to talk about like pin downs or anything in my stories because no one knows.
Well, not that, but I think what's interesting is when you can kind of, especially this was great because Danny Ainge. I'm a huge Celtics fan.
Yeah.
And Danny Ainge was coaching the Suns when I was covering them, and he was just a huge dick to me. And I remember it was like the Dan Marley. Like Danny Manning team where Mark Bryant was like their inside guy. So everyone was just shooting threes. Mm-hmm. And
is this post Barkley?
I think he's
This would have been right after Barkley.
I think he
right
was
when
with the Rockets.
Went to Houston, okay.
And then I'm like, I'm giving, because same thing with Bird. I gave him like a fluff question because I just, and I was like,
he's Larry Bird, man. Yeah.
And he's like my hero. And same with Ainge, but I didn't know Ainge was always kind of like dismissive. So I was like, hey, because I forget, whoever played inside had like 28 points, which they never had. Like all they had was perimeter guys.
Yeah.
Rex Chapman. All that. So I'm like, hey, was it a surprise that you got, such production on the inside tonight? And that was just a fluff. Yes, of course, blah, blah. And he's like, no, we've got great inside guys, and like, trying to like just spin it and be a dick about it. I'm like, hey, dude, do you want me to give you the stats of what your inside production is? But he was the away coach, so I didn't want to mess with him. But
I think you can here. I think that you can definitely challenge. I think
well, I guess the point was like if you kind of give a window, like if I had given that follow up question, maybe he would have given me his side of.
I think you would have gotten a better answer, probably. Yeah. I think like, and
so
this is something.
Go that line of like,
sometimes,
I don't want to offend the guy. But.
Like, I mean, like, I don't worry too much about offending him anymore because I think they know that I'm fair. Like, I've got like a track record of being fair.
Now, where do you think that? How do you earn that? Do you think
time?
Yeah. You think these guys read your stuff and they don't mention?
But I think people around them maybe do.
Okay.
Like, no, not really. I mean, I work for a newspaper. Barely anybody reads my stuff.
But I'm sure they hear don't say anything to this guy.
Like if I write something negative, they'll hear about it way more often than if you write something positive. But usually they're reasonable on stuff, and I think they understand too that it's like it's part of the job. I mean, like I have found this that if you criticize people for their on-court stuff, they're generally fine with it. Mm-hmm. Because they know. Like, I mean, nothing. I'm not going to be harder on Blake Griffin than Blake Griffin's harder on himself.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, I can't, like, I won't be. You know what I mean? Like, because I don't care about Blake Griffin's, 2 for 13 free throw shooting, whatever, when I go home.
Right.
Whereas he's going to care about it. Like, so I think that if I write about, I mean, they might get annoyed sometimes having to talk about it. Mm-hmm. But it's like, my approach to it is always like, there's simple solutions to it. Like, make more free throws, and we won't talk about poor free throw shooting, or don't turn the ball over, and we won't talk about turnovers. I think like it's pretty. I mean, there's an idea that like the media is always trying to be negative, and
well, I mean, New York, they are trying to get a story. So if somebody says,
I mean, that's happening here too. But
not the back page type of.
No, it's not like that.
Chris Paul has no heart or something. You know what I mean?
You're
not going that.
No, it's not like that. I mean, I think that like like for me, it's like I just always try. I understand that I'm in a position that the Clipper fans want to be in.
Yeah.
So I try to tell them what I see, hear, and know, and I try to like I said, kind of translate that. And kind of walk a line where, like, the super smart basketball people still understand what, like, they respect the fact that I'm not dumbing it down too much, whereas the people who aren't hardcore basketball people at least can grasp hold of, like, the narratives about, say, playing in front of a home. Like, if you write something about, like, like DeAndre Jordan, for instance, had, like, a friend who passed away when he was, like, 18 years old. All right, and he started a foundation and stuff, and he would buy tickets like in like that guy's name every time. Like he did it for the first time in Houston this year. Like I wrote about that, and that was like a really easy to story. That was an easy story to write because it had emotion and stuff like that, and like you just kind of let him talk about it, and he was great and was open, and like that was the type of story I think that like non-basketball people like whatever it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing in there about how good he is.
Right.
Like, and that's the other thing too. It's not my job to like. Everybody knows how good these guys are.
Now, do you? I mean, you obviously are probably on the train of like Blake is a really funny guy and interesting.
I do think he's very funny.
And I would say Chris Paul tries to go more of the Derek Jeter route.
I think he is very professional.
Yeah, because what was interesting during that commercial when we were, and I was literally like in his face, and you were next to me, and he just looked up from his phone and said, "Hey, did you hear about our new teammate?"
Yeah.
And it was when they got Reddick.
The Reddick.
And it was kind of funny that he talked to you like you were at the office. You're like, "Hey, did you hear about Frank in accounting?"
Well, I mean, that's like, yeah. I think a lot of times, like the transactional part of it is like one thing guys are always interested in. So like around the trade deadline, or like I know what'll happen early this year. We'll be in the locker room for a game, and we'll all be kind of just like BSing and stuff, and we'll talk about guys who got traded, guys who got free agent deals, what guys got, who's overpaid, who got like who got underpaid and stuff. Like I know, like guys definitely talk about that, and like that's one thing. Like everybody's got their antennas up, for that type of stuff. Yeah, that's fun. I like that part of it because, I think at least on that level, like you can kind of talk to guys about basketball that way. Like, it's hard to talk to them. Like, it's hard to be really critical of, like, Jared Dudley to the extent of, like, hey, your elbow's flying out on your jump shot. Like, that's not me. Like that's not my job. You know what? No matter if I notice something or not. Like, that's not my, like. I would have,
this is the only thing that, like, and I love Blake's, like, I like the way he plays. He's still very raw. And like doesn't, but the one thing that really bothers me, and I know it bothers like coaches when he like sets picks and he turns the wrong way after he sets the pick, like he doesn't design the ball. He turns, and it's because he's so athletic, he can turn around quicker than anybody else. But I know like for fundamental guys,
it's like you should
like
screen.
UB Brown, I know his
pivot
gut,
the right way and stuff. Yeah.
Well, it's like when he screens, he just turns the other way and doesn't. He was eyeing the ball, whereas that's just something like a coach would be like, "Come on, Blake."
Yeah,
and I wonder if Doc even worries about that stuff anymore.
I think that I think that they look at like certain levels of like fundamentals like that, but I also think like at a certain point, like you look at someone like Matt Barnes' jump shot, which is like weird looking,
right?
You know what I mean? Like he's got like some side spin on it. Like it's like not a normal looking jump shot. Like he almost blocks his shot.
Right.
Like his let with his offhand. And it's like at this point it's just like there's no point in trying to fix it.
Well, it's even like foul shots. There's certain guys, and I feel like even with Shaq too, they would talk about like how many foul shots he shoots per day.
They shoot
practice.
A ton.
And I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's a mental thing at that point. Like if you can't recreate being in an arena with everyone looking at you and shooting foul shots. Like, it's a mental thing. Like, that's when I do completely believe in, like, some kind of meditation or, like, a kind of a visualization thing.
But I think it's so hard to go from being, like, bad at something to being, like, good at something. But like, that's a tough transition.
But you've seen there's guys that, like...
Well, like, Blake last year was, a fairly fine free-throw shooter. Like, I mean... And I think a lot of it was, like you said, was mental. Like, I think, and he'll admit to it, was that, like, he was not afraid to shoot free throws anymore. Yeah.
I think it's almost like a hitting streak. Like, you're only going to have a certain amount of these every game. And, like, you can see, like, Ray Allen's, 90% foul shooter. If he misses 2 in a row, that's, like, jarring to him. And that's almost dangerous because that might
that bleeds over.
His head.
Yeah, like Jamal Crawford's like that. There were a couple times last year, like he's another guy who's like 89% free throw shooter or whatever, where he'd miss 2 free throws in a row, and you're like, wow, like that's like way more. Yeah. Like that's like way more rare than like seeing like.
Well, you would think percentage-wise, okay, he's not going to miss again, but it's almost worse because that's in his head that he's not making these.
Totally. I mean, it's like here, it's like those guys that. I mean, the people, that's one of those fun fan criticisms, like, oh, I could make free throws. I could go
right.
Like, go to a game and watch the guys that have to shoot just like a half-court shot or whatever, and, like, how hard, how rare it is that, like, anybody comes close. You know what I mean? And it's just because it's, like, the environment's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And it really is one of those things, like, I marvel. One of the things that I think, like, you know, I mean, obviously the skill that these guys have is outrageous. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that impresses me most about being around high-level athletes, whether it's pro athletes or college athletes, or just the ability to kind of like internalize and like focus on what needs to be done and not get distracted.
Mental, like, confidence. Like, that's why I was going to ask you, like, so you've watched practices. Are there guys that are, like, amazing in practice that don't play well in the games?
Like, so Clipper, like, NBA practices are mostly closed. Like, so we see a little of it, but I remember seeing that a lot at USC. When I covered USC football, there were guys that were, like, amazing in practice.
That always fascinated me.
And one of those guys was Jordan Cameron, who's on the Cleveland Browns now, who's an all-pro tight end or whatever. And, like, he was really raw. But, like, I remember, like, having discussions about, like, oh, this guy will catch 13 touchdown passes this year. He's amazing. And I think he might have played, 15 plays that season and stuff. But yeah, and I don't think it was a transition thing. I think it was just getting used to it. But I mean, it's like anything. Like, as soon as you lose the fact that you think, like, you're good at something, like, I would imagine in your line of work, like, if you went up and bombed, like, your first 3 jokes, how does that not affect the rest of your set?
Right. That's true. But I'll say, like...
So when you construct your set, I bet you go out of your way to make sure you don't bomb early. Like, the way that it's put together.
It depends, but it's very, like, sometimes all that stuff is out of your control. So it's just like, I shot all the foul shots I can, but if I'm in the game and I've got this guy guard, like, it's just all the... It's not controlled by me. It's controlled by those people. That's the frustrating part of it.
Do you find that there's, like, not to hijack your podcast, ask a question. Do you find that there's correlation between your time as an athlete and your time as a comedian in terms of, like, the ability to, like, perform and how you approach performances?
Yeah, I think it's always, especially if, because there's some guys that are comedians that have just ultra confidence in everything they do.
Sure.
I play basketball with comedians who are terrible, and they'll keep shooting and they'll get upset. You've seen the guys that'll take a 3-pointer and miss it, and they're like, It's like, you've never practiced in your entire life. You haven't shot a basketball in 2 months. Why would you even think that has a shot at going in? It's like going golfing with guys that get upset for shanking one. It's like, where do you even get that confidence? Like, all my confidence comes from, this is how much work I put into it. It's almost like the Larry Bird thing. It's like, I'm going to shoot the ball. I'm going to take the last shot because I practiced the most. That's like the surest way to
no one has worked harder than me, so I'm the person who should be doing this.
Or I've worked so hard on this, I know it's going to work.
Other than just, like, doing sets
and also not being intimidated. Obviously, I'm 5'9", so if I was ever intimidated by taller guys or bigger guys,
it would never
work for you. So
I think there's definitely elements of confidence. Like, obviously, like, how do you get better as a comedian? Other than just reps,
I think it's trying. You have to keep trying new stuff because you get to a point where you find your voice.
People always say that,
and then you can talk about anything. Like Chappelle was one of those guys. Like, you can listen to him talk about anything, and he's funny. Or Norm Macdonald, or there's certain guys that, like, they're completely in their voice, so they can be funny about anything. So that's what you want. Like, that's the danger of, like, being a character or being, like, a guy that screams around. It's like, well, what happens when you have to be on a radio show or on TV? Like, you can't be that guy all the time for an hour a night. So, and, you have to make sure that all your stuff works.
Like, do you study? Do you watch, like, tape of yourself?
Yeah. That's one of the big things is, like, you kind of go over, especially doing something like Letterman or Ferguson. It's like you have to kind of break down what's working, what isn't, what can I try to make this better, what's going to happen. And that's all, a lot of it's experience, It's just like, if you have a guy that's played in the playoffs before, he knows what to expect, you know?
Yeah, I think there's elements of this in journalism where it's like there are guys who you compete with, you know, because you want to write the best story, you know. But there are people that, like, I know that if I was working on something, I could call them or email them and say, hey, take a look at this. What do you think?
Oh, yeah.
And that happens in comedy, too, even though, because you guys are super competitive, too, right?
Well, but that's interesting because I think the writing part is the toughest for me because how would you know if it's any good? I guess you're not.
I see, and like, here's the thing, Paul. Like, I have this conversation all the time. I still I don't know if I'm any good at my job. I have no clue.
Yeah,
I think I am because there aren't a lot of people who have my job and they haven't taken it from me. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know. It's like really hard to like, you can quantify it like in really weird ways, like, you know, how many Twitter followers do I have?
Yeah.
How many? If I write something, how many people read it? You know,
but I mean, you've made the transition to. I mean, Rome has you on his show.
I do that, and they asked for me back, so that's helpful.
You did a bunch. So, what was that like the first time you got to do something like that?
Super terrifying.
Yeah,
I was like really afraid I was going to curse.
But you look like I watched. How many times you been on? 3?
No, way more than that.
Okay,
no.
I've probably watched 2 or 3 of them. You always look really confident.
Yeah,
you always look prepared.
I think that. I don't know. It's. I like doing that. Like I was surprised how comfortable I was. At first, like I mean, when it's really only 5 minutes, and like talking about sports with 2 other people for 5 minutes is super easy to do.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can get lost in it pretty quickly.
But you start like looking at, I do that with my hand, or all that kind of stuff.
I say a lot.
Exactly.
It's like one of my verbal tics. Is like
so you have to like.
And I hear that a lot, and I don't know. I don't spend a ton of time walking around the house being like, okay, every time you say I'm gonna like pinch myself or something like that. like use like a thumbtack or anything. I don't do anything like that. But like I think it's gone away. Like I have no idea on this podcast how many times I've said I might have said it a ton, and I would have no idea. And now I'm thinking about it, and I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next. And so good times.
Where is like the where
he's really good though. I should say that.
Yeah.
He is a point guard. He's like a TV point guard. Like he just like.
I went to the pilot of that, I think, and he looks like
the
a guy
Showtime show.
Yeah. He looks like a guy who can just talk in like an empty room by himself.
Well, that's what he does on his radio show.
Yeah.
I mean, really, but like he is like when he's there, he is so good at making you look good. Like,
but he does engage you, like you feel like he is listening to you.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's a really good interview, and I wasn't like a huge fan of his before, just because. He's a kind of has an abrasive style. It's like kind of like he's got his listeners and they've got like their mythology.
Yeah,
and like I wasn't in on it. Yeah, I wasn't in on it. So it was like but after doing the TV show with him a couple times, it's like you get a real appreciation for just how quick he is and how willing he just knows the right question to ask always. A question that you're going to answer well. Like he knows, it's like he hits you right in the shooting pocket, like every time, and that's incredible skill.
Yeah. What do you? But I guess
and that makes it easier.
The big part of doing that is like, I mean, especially since pardon the interruption and all that kind of stuff. Like you see these guys that are trying to be funny first instead of this is a sports program.
Yeah,
and I always feel like Dan Patrick was like the best guy at like. Finding that line of like
it's hard.
I want it to be informative, and then when there's something funnier or something, I'll put that in too. But if like when I was doing the TV sports anchor stuff, I would see the guy I was working with. He's like, I can't wait to use this catchphrase tonight. Like the whole thing was just based around
just
him saying this
like a 3-minute
thing.
setup to
And when I watch ESPN, that's exactly what there's this guy who's been waiting to do this introduction, equating some baseball player to Austin Powers for 3 months
since Austin Powers came out. Yeah. No, I mean, I fall victim to that sometimes because like. I don't want to say I try to be funny, but like that's sort of like that's the approach I take.
Well, if that's what's making your job fun, you have to do it. But if like you're making your joke in front of the story, I feel like that's the
that's the hard part. And it's like in my writing, like right now, like where I'm at, like luckily, like I mean, it's more on Twitter than it is anywhere else. Like on Twitter, like I try to crack jokes every once in a while.
Yeah, because you have such an economy of words for these articles. Like when you're on your own, like when Bill Simmons is writing a 700-page book, I don't care how many references
he can reference he can reference Tori Spelling. It's hard for me to do that, no matter how badly I might want to, like, work a Donna Martin reference in. It's hard, but I think and I do think that there's a cult of like, because it's like anything, right? So it's like athletes, like the joke is like athletes all want to be like either musicians or actors, right? And actors and musicians all want to be athletes. I do think that there's elements of like sports writers who want to like write like comedy. Yeah, like definitely, especially younger ones, because like
it's frankly why I got out of it, because I realized that I was trying to make I would do something about like, I don't know, some story that was supposed to be like heartfelt, and I would just be making jokes the whole time. And I was like, well, I should be doing comedy if that's what you want to do. Like the Wayman Tisdale obituary story wasn't the right place for a good saxophone crack or something like that. Or it was just like, it was way, and then I figured out like, oh, I don't want to do this. I want to be on Weekend Update, or I want to be on The Daily Show. Like this isn't what I want to do. Yeah. And so that's when I got into it. But now it seems like if you're a newspaper writer, then you get on ESPN and you get to crack jokes, and it's really hard to watch sometimes. Like Kornheiser and Wilbon they do okay with it. I mean, they still are kind of annoyingly making too many jokes, but you can tell they know their stuff. I think they're really good. They're sort of the standard for everybody on that type of show. I mean, like on Rome, occasionally, like I'll get a good zing in. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like, but like that's really, I mean, there's not enough time to like actually like say something super funny. Right. You know what I mean? Like you get like, you've got these topics, it's pretty structured. And most of the stuff that I think is really funny, I probably can't say. Right, exactly. You have it's like kind of representing a newspaper and a newspaper in Orange County, California. Yeah. They gotta probably temper some stuff. But this has got to be kind of when you first started working here, it's got to be like a dream come true to be doing what you're doing right now. Totally. Yeah. I mean, like it's it's funny. It's like the TV stuff is like I used to hate TV people. Like yeah, me too. Yeah. And it was like and then you start doing it and you're like, "Oh, okay, I get it." Like and it's fun and it's quick. You know what I mean? Like when I do Rome, like I'm there for I'm doing it all next week, and I'm there for like an hour and a half a day. Yeah, and it's great, and it's fun, and like you're with other people you like, and their staff is great and stuff like that. And you just kind of, you sit around, you joke around with people, and it's like when you do it a bunch of times, it's like go sitting in a room with your friends and stuff. It's fun. But also, you're a guy that prepares, and like your whole thing is based on stuff that you've spent 8 hours a day covering. Yeah, I mean, like, and I guess the big challenge that, like, the Rome shows have given me is, like, so they asked me to talk about stuff more than the Clippers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't go on and talk about the Clippers. I barely talk about the Clippers. Like, I talk a lot about, like, the NFL or something like that. I think that's flattering, right? Yeah, oh, totally. And it's, like, awesome challenge because, like... You got to be ready. Yeah. So it's, like, this last year, like, I watched way more NFL than I normally would watch. You know what I mean? Like, you watch... way more college football. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's, I'll pay attention more to the NFL type of stuff and like for next week because that's what people want to talk about. So like, I would bet you $20 right now that I would talk about Johnny Manziel next week at least once. Right. But it's like one of the things that I've had to learn is that like you got to be like opinionated. Like you do have to have an opinion. You can't go on TV and I think there's a fine line. Like you can do like and Rome can smell that. Oh yeah, like you can do like the trolling kind of like, oh, I'm gonna have this wild opinion that's just gonna get a reaction out of people. I think that the challenge for me is to have an opinion that isn't like that still like gets reactions, but is like still grounded in reality. Right. You know what I mean? That like sometimes like it's hard to say like, okay, like if they'll be like, should Johnny Manziel be the starting quarterback? Like that's like a general question, and like the real answer to that is, how do I know? It's you know what I mean. It's so early in the year. Like, is his partying a distraction? Like I don't know. It doesn't seem like it could. Like it seems like guys have managed to
athletes generally have managed to kind of balance partying with on-field success. Those two things don't go together. It wasn't like Michael Jordan was just going back to his hotel room and not doing anything. Like, it doesn't matter. But, you know,
I've heard he's a head case already.
Yeah, I mean, like, but it's like you can't be like, I don't know. You can't say I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or if you do say I don't know, you've got to say it in a way that's still like you still know more than other people.
Yeah.
It's
like
really weird.
Back, like he's coming into a situation where
like you've got to kind of find it. And like I think that's the hardest part about doing it is like having like a strong opinion that you really believe, but that you also know like isn't some crazy opinion that you're just doing it to get a reaction out of people.
Well, I want to talk real quick about so I mean, this was a great year for the Clippers.
Sure.
But then with the Sterling thing happens, you're kind of in the middle of that circus too.
Yeah, I felt like I was right in the middle of it. It was awesome. It was unbelievable. It was like one of the weirdest and most fascinating things I've ever seen or done in my life.
And I didn't realize how much of a toll it took on the team. Like, I think I asked you because I had heard that rumor that they were just not going to play that game against the Warriors.
Yeah.
Like when it happened.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I didn't believe it was as big a story as it turned out to be. Like, I guess everyone kind of knew this guy is crazy and he's a racist, and so what's it really going to come down to? And then I realized like what level the thing was in.
I think it was.
Did you realize it was that big as when you first?
Yeah. So I had a feeling. So I was in San Francisco, staying in San Francisco. My girlfriend had.
This is during the Warriors
series. During the series, the way the schedule had worked out, I think they played on like a Wednesday or something like that, or a Thursday, and they had Friday and Saturday night. They weren't playing, and they played against Sunday. So it was like, listen, this will be nice. My girlfriend will come up. We'll be able to have some fun and go do some stuff and like whatever. It'll be like a little mini vacation, a nice little break in San Francisco. And that Friday night, we had went to the Giants played the Indians. We went to the game, and afterwards we went to go watch another playoff game across the street at like a Lucky Strike or something like that, and sitting there and ordered some food. And I got an email that just had a link, and it was like it was the link to the Stiviano tapes. I was like, oh man, and like I mean, my girlfriend hated me, like because I told her, I'm like, yeah, all those plans we had tomorrow, the rest of the night, like we can't do any of it.
Oh, so you knew it like right away.
Yeah, I'm like, this is going to be huge. Sure enough, the next day you go to Clipper practice and you're there and you're trying to ask questions, and CNN's trying to ask questions.
Oh,
and
so that's when you knew.
TMZ and Inside Edition, and like it's like, oh, this is the biggest news story in the country right now. And like. It's funny, we talk about like it taking toll on players, and before I mentioned about the grind of the season, it was like as just sort of a weird general rule, I learned that like as a reporter, you do get kind of a sense of where the team's at energy wise based on where your energy is. Like if it's a long road trip,
you're doing the same traveling.
Exactly, yeah, and like you're keeping similar hours and stuff like that. And actually, they'll tell you the media travel's harder because we're flying commercial. Whatever. I mean, they're leaving right after games on private jets.
Right.
I'm waking up at 7, you know what I mean, to get to the airport by 8, stuff like that. So, but during that story, like that initial burst of like, from when the tapes came out to the day the silver ruling and they played, I think it was game 5 in LA, the blackout game and stuff.
But that was the one they were almost.
Like, they almost didn't play that game either. Like no one knew what they were going to do, and then Silver banned him for life, and like players all rallied around it and stuff, and liked the decision. But like that was so exhausting. Like I remember I had a conversation with a coworker before that game about like what direction I was going to go with my story, and he disagreed. And I almost was like, forget this, and like I almost walked away. Yeah. And it was just because I was so tired. And I was so like exhausted and like. Trying to do the right thing and like, you know what I mean? Because it was so, like, everybody was paying attention.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was so hard. And like, that's where I kind of knew that's where, like, where I had family and friends calling me and radio stations wanting to talk about it, like, they had to talk to their wives and they had to talk to their brothers and their sisters and their friends. and they had to hear about how they shouldn't have to play, and they had to hear about how they were doing the wrong thing or they were doing the right thing, and it was like all anybody wanted to talk about, even if it was just harmless, like, hey, how are you holding up? Then you've got to answer that question and stuff, and it was like super consuming. And since then, since the season ended and it's moved towards like the trial part of it and like all that stuff, like that was way more at least interesting to me than like the immediate like emotional thing. Like, I mean, you saw like Doc Rivers looked horrible. Like, I mean, like, and he wasn't sleeping, and it's because everybody was constantly thinking about how they should handle this situation before there was like no blueprint for. It was crazy.
And you don't want to like, they're talking about like, will you leave? Like that's what they were talking to everybody about. Would you leave if he's back? And it's a hard question to ask,
especially when you're trying. Like, remember, JJ Redick said something to me during that I thought was interesting. It was like he was saying like, the NBA playoffs are so hard when you play a team 7 times in a row. Like it's so hard that like if you like and that they're really hard. It's hard to win a series if you're giving a team 99% attention.
Right.
With like the extra 1% just for life. You know what I mean? If 99% of your focus on a team, it's really hard to beat that team. Like, I don't know, they were at maybe 60% to the Warriors. Or that's maybe generous, maybe 30%. I mean, it was such a distraction.
Right.
Like, it was
matchups, like that's the difference between the playoffs. Like if you have one matchup that's in the other team's favor, then
and they exploit it because you missed the counter or whatever because your head was in a weird spot. Yeah, like it was, and they did the thing where they rallied around. They weren't going to let him cost them a series, or and that's how they handled it, and it worked. Like good for them. It was so bizarre.
Yeah.
Still, like I was watching a Clipper game last week, or earlier this week, and. There's like, there's V. Stiviano sitting right behind the Minnesota Timberwolves bench. And it's like, oh, yeah, she's at, like, every game. And, like, you just forget that, like...
So you never saw her before
I know, I recognized her. Like, I knew her. Like, you'd see her around.
But you didn't know, like, what she was.
I didn't know she was secretly taping Donald Sterling.
No, but did you know it was, like, she was, like, a partner of...
Some sort of... Like, I knew there was, like, yeah, there was, like, a relationship. Like...
Okay.
And, like, the best way that I would describe the Sterlings to people... Or one of the ways is that during this season, Shelley Sterling sued V. Stiviano for like return of common property. Essentially, accused her of being like a gold digger, and was like
because they're still married, right?
Still married, yeah, still married. Most complicated marriage of all time.
Yeah.
And so like and the dates might be wrong, but like let's say they like the suit went in and got filed on like a Tuesday. Then the next Clipper game was a home game on a Thursday, and like there was Donald, he was there. There was Shelley, she was there, and there's V. Stiviano. Like all three of them are in the same building, and it's like there's no shame over the fact that like like your wife just sued your alleged mistress, and it's like so like everybody decides to go to the same party. Like when couples like get like break up or like divorce, like no one wants to go to like the same like family functions or anything like that. It's like no, like they just whatever.
So where are we at right now with that? Is it just
so it seems like it's wrapping up. Like he's still got a couple like I guess bullets to fire that are kind of long shots. It feels like that Steve Ballmer's going to eventually own the team here,
right? And
he seems like he's going to be somebody that people are really going to like. It just seems like he's an excitable guy and like seems like a kind of as regular of like a person as you can be when you have $20 billion, but I mean that's kind of where we're at. Like the trial's over. Shelley won,
right?
Like pretty much a clean sweep. Not pretty much. It was like she won everything, and he'll appeal a little bit. Like he's got some things he can do, but it seems like a long shot. So
I mean, do you feel like Doc and the rest of the guys are positive about last year? Or do they feel bad that happened? Like that could have cost them.
It's hard to say. I mean, like the Spurs were so good.
Yeah.
Like they could have I think they could have beat the Thunder, and
well, that was the step I thought they needed to take.
Yeah, and like I think there was like a cumulative mental effect in the playoffs. So like the Clippers felt like they got jobbed in that one game in Oklahoma City where there was like a botched review call or whatever, and like they thought that they got screwed.
Yeah.
And I think they totally collapsed. Like that was a game they should have won. It should have been in that position anyways.
Right.
And I think like that was like just too much. Mm-hmm. Like after everything they had been through, that was the breaking point. And moving forward, like I think maybe if the Sterling thing didn't happen, maybe they would have had a little more mental reserve.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is
to come back from that or something.
Yeah. But the Heat being handled that hard, that almost pushed LeBron out. You know what I mean? Like if they'd have lost, I guess he probably would have left if they lost in the conference finals. But like to get beat that bad, they're just like, we're not going to beat that team.
I think they had to look around and be like, we need to get a lot better, a lot quicker.
Because I think about it, even if the series was a little closer, they would have had a shot. But it's like, yeah, it's so demoralizing to lose to them in that way. To like, these guys are older than us. It
was a
it wasn't even close. And talk about matchups. I mean, that was one where it's just like they had no answers.
Like the Spurs. Like to me, to try to bring it back to like comedy for a second, like the Spurs are like this someone who's been doing the same act for like 10 years, and it's just so polished. And they know when to pause for laughs. They know
they always do well. Yeah.
The timing of everything. It's the second playoff series I covered was when the Spurs swept the Clippers 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And I never saw a team like operate with just like so much efficiency. It was just like, here's a three, here's a layup, here's a three. It was incredible.
And so prepared too.
So just everybody knows what they're doing. Yeah. Like they're just like, it's amazing how it's like when everybody knows what their job is and they're good at their jobs,
right,
how like efficiently something can run. And that's like what it was. It's incredible. I was not surprised at all. I mean, LeBron's the best player in the world. Like, and it's not close in my opinion. But like, I was not surprised. The Spurs don't surprise me anymore. Like,
what do you think the difference between like him and Durant is? Because I think I agree with you. Like LeBron does so many other things, and
that's
the fact
what it is.
That he's so unselfish too. Like I feel like he's good for the league even. But Durant, when I watch him play, like he's unstoppable.
He's the most unique scorer, I think. Yeah. Like I mean, he's like George Gervin, but 7 feet tall.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's unbelievable. Like,
and I always wonder if he had a real point guard. Is that going to help his game, or because they just play playground take turns? Like Westbrook, you dribble up and shoot. This time I dribble up and shoot. And it's like if they had any kind of structure at all, would
they be better or worse? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I look at like a guy like LeBron. Like I think the difference with LeBron is that on any night, I think he could be the best defensive player on the court if he wanted to be. I think he could be the best passer on the court if he wanted to be. I mean, there's no one who gets to the rim with his kind of force.
Right.
Like, he's so strong.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you see him in person, too, it's like, he looks huge on TV, and he is gigantic in person. I mean, like...
Well, he has complete control of everything that's going on there. So
he's like, I mean, he's a freak. You know what I mean? Like, guys like... like, people don't look like that. you know what I mean? And, like... I mean, it's like, that's like Dwight Howard's like that, too. Like, you see a guy like Dwight Howard, and you're like, wow. Like, what planet are you from?
Well, that's why I watched that game this year, the Rockets Clippers one, and I was like, and you still don't know until you see the guys match up with him. I was like, can Blake and DeAndre really stop him? Yeah. And the thing was, they couldn't stop him, but he couldn't stop them either.
Well, that's the story of the NBA. Really is like, and that's what makes the Spurs so good is that they don't have to rely on like individual matchups because they feel like our system will find your weakness and then we'll beat your weakness. But like, I mean, like a guy like Dwight Howard is like so physically dominant. You know what I mean? Like, you just slow those people down a little bit, and that's how you win. You know what I mean? Is like Durant, like this was like when the Clippers played the Thunder. It's like they knew Durant was going to get his 30. You know what I mean? But like they weren't gonna.
Right.
But it's like, how hard is he going to work to get that 30?
You know what's interesting, though, is that, Doc brought Big Baby in, and that, watch him play Dwight Howard. He's like the only guy that Dwight can't back down. And
it's
don't
like
know
him
what
and like
is.
Jason Collins.
It's
or
very
like
strange.
the two. It was like Jason Collins was always like the Dwight Howard stopper.
Yeah, I was like, and until you saw them against each other, you couldn't quite.
You wouldn't think. Well, that's another guy. Is like Big Baby is like gigantic.
Yeah.
He is huge.
And he's so short, like he would never be able to back in offensively, but for some reason he can just he has that certain strength that Dwight can't.
Yeah, he's so strong and so wide and he's
But
he's
I mean,
enormous.
you see Blake just back down these guys like they're not even there. And
but and then but there's like a guy like Draymond Green gave him trouble that way too, and like Draymond's smaller.
Is there a guy that Blake has trouble with, like
trying to
physically?
stop? I'm trying to think.
No, like even like scoring against or a guy that really muscles him up.
I mean, like you could when you put like bigger guys on him, like a guy like Pekovic or someone, or like Omer Sheik.
But even though, like I used to see Gasol would just crumble when he was around Blake.
I mean, the guy that Blake the guy that he struggles with sometimes is Zach Randolph.
I can see that.
And just because Zach is like. He knows how to get under Blake's skin, and
he's got that.
Like he enjoys.
Paul
it.
Pierce has that strength too. Like you wouldn't think that he could just
like that kind of like flabby strength almost.
I don't know.
I don't mean that in a negative way.
He can back down LeBron. Paul Pierce can still, and it's just this weird kind of like tree root kind of strength.
Use their bodies so
and
well.
He completely believes that he can get by him, and that's almost half the battle too. You know that you're not intimidated by him.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like those guys that like. I'm always fascinated to the guys that like maximize. And it's like Paul Pierce, he's a good athlete. Obviously, he's a good athlete,
but he shouldn't.
But he's not like he's not
compared
to
these guys.
Yeah, he's not like when you look at the guys that like the athlete, like the good athletes in the NBA, like the Gerald Greens, the Blake Griffins, the Eric Bledsoes, the Dwight Howards. Like those guys are like different planet. But it's like he's smart and like he knows how to like. That's the one neat thing about the NBA that like. Is if you're still like if you know how to use it, and you're smart, like that still almost always wins out.
Well, and that was the thing with Steph Curry. It's like if he can do what he's doing in college to these guys, they still won't be able to stop it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like a Nate Robinson guy. It's like if he can still get his shot off against these guys, or Nash even. There was a point where it's like, is he fast enough to?
Exactly. I think it's those guys that are like that. They know what they have to do because they've been dealing with these things. Like so, Steph Curry, in college, like teams would throw double teams at him all the time.
Yeah.
Like so he knew when and how he had to get his shots up.
Right.
So he developed that transition three, or that's why I'm like kind of like in on Doug McDermott. As a guy who I think is going to be pretty good, is because like teams throw he spent 3 years in college, where he was the focal point of every defense he played. And he still was, the leading scorer in the NCAA.
You know what I'm still high on is
Adam Morrison.
No, I still think Jimmer can play.
Yeah.
I still think
he doesn't have a position though.
But he's such a and that's you might know this. Like if he can't guard guys, that's one thing, but he can knock down shots. And I've seen him get in. Like the Kings would put him in at garbage time, and he would just light it up. Like he could still score on.
I mean, I think that's like you would need someone to devote.
It's all system.
Like you got to devote real minutes and opportunities.
It's all system. Like if LeBron said, "I like that guy," I'm going to have him in a corner. I'm going to have Ray Allen in a corner. I'm going to have Mike Miller spotting up. Like if that became a thing,
do you feel like though, like that Jimmer, and I haven't watched a ton of him. And, like, he's a good shooter. There's, like, no question. He's, like, a really good shooter.
Yeah.
But is he, like, that kind of a shooter? Or is he, like, an off-the-dribble... You know what I mean? Like, those little subtle things.
Well, like you said, he's done everything. Like, he had triple teams in college. So it's like
he would run around and stuff. But I feel like, though, that sometimes it takes time to, like, become, like, the spot-up guy. Like, it's weird. Like, there's this concept in the NBA of being, like, too open.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because, like...
he reminds me of... You might be... I don't know if... You remember when the Rockets had this guy Matt Maloney?
Oh yeah,
I think he's Matt Maloney. Like he's a strong guy. He can hit the open shot.
He's a good athlete. Jimmer's a good athlete.
Just good enough ball handling where he can be out there.
Did anyone sign him yet?
Yeah, Pelicans, but it's like league minimum.
Yeah, I mean, like,
and people need shooters so much. Like even the Clippers, like to have a guy that's like a drop dead shooter.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got enough guys on your roster as it is, but I think like for a team that needs just a spot up shooter that has a guy that can get to the basket.
Yeah. I don't know on him, just because I just don't know with like him if it's going to translate.
Like a second team guy. I'm not
like they like to be. Oh yeah, because of like the defense and because of the kind of scorer.
Because you've seen like,
but I mean, he feels like you look at him now though, and it's like, but it's like he doesn't play with the same kind of confidence that he had, and how could he?
Right. But I feel that's what I saw though when I saw him get in because he's playing behind Isaiah Thomas or whatever, and he would get in and he would just fire. And it's like, wow, this guy has that.
Dude,
Jason Williams.
People love him.
Yeah.
Too. It is.
That's the other thing.
Like that. Like that's
fun to watch. You know.
Like he. When I was in Vegas for Summer League, like one of my favorite things I saw was like some little kid wearing a Jimmer Fredette like Bulls jersey T-shirt, and it's like he was on the team for like 2 weeks, and it's like they got those printed out just in time and stuff.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I'll end on this. What do you think? What do you think for the Clippers this year? It's hard to be. Do you feel like you're a homer or like
no.
Job? Well, I felt like I would. I don't know. It's tough when you're in there. Like you're definitely rooting for the team, but you have to be realistic about their.
Yeah. See, I don't really good or bad or whatever. I mean, like if they're good, more people pay attention. It's better for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Losing teams can sometimes be even more fun to cover than winning teams because then guys start saying everything.
How's that?
Well, it's just like when you're losing, guys are frustrated. Guys will.
Oh, so they say.
Those,
more interview.
Yeah, they're like, you know, I mean, like I wouldn't say I root for the Clippers like by any stretch, but I mean, like I think that I think they're better than they were last year, and I think they were pretty good last year. So, you know, I mean, like anything, I think a second year under the system, a second year.
And everybody definitely respects Doc. Like,
yeah.
That was one of the best things that happened.
Like, I mean, like, and he only built credibility with them through the whole Sterling thing too. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, like if they doubted him a little, like, you know, they're all in on him now. So I don't know. I mean, I think they'll be good. I mean, the West is going to be really good though too. I mean, it's going to be, you know, I think you could be a really good team and lose in the first round.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Houston was. I mean, Houston was a pretty good team last year, and you know, Dallas is better. Golden State is good. I mean, the Thunder, the Spurs, the Blazers.
So you're not making any predictions. I'm just putting you in the.
You want me to make a prediction? I think the Clippers will make the conference finals if they stay healthy.
Okay.
Just because I think that second year is huge, but like I said, I would not be surprised if. I mean, that's my on-the-spot prediction. See, and you see this is sports. See, I'm going to double back on it. But I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. So.
Now, will we be in the new Chris Paul and Nike commercials?
I don't think so. Sadly, I think we've acted our way out of them. You might get a call. I think that they've seen enough of me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that they're. I remember like when we were there, like, what are you doing here? You know, wasn't in like the most excited way ever, but I was like,
oh, that's
just
funny.
Dusting off the acting shoes. You know?
All right, well, you're coming down to the show tonight.
Yep.
Is there any? So your columns online? Or
you read me at ocregister.com, at Twitter at Dan Woike Sports, which might get changed to just at Dan Woike. I don't know. Okay. I'm toying with it. It's a big move.
You get both.
I don't want to have two accounts though.
You want to protect that though, so somebody can't start.
I know. I'm
porn on there or something.
Yeah, that would be bad.
And then watch. So you're gonna be
and watch Jim Rome next week. Yeah, so that'll be fun.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the show, Dan.
Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Well, I'm down on my luck. Oh, send lawyers, guns, and